Share. This is it there. Can you see it?
Hmm?
So for Andrew is on. I don't know if Colin will be on, and Connie Carlson are partners in this massive project. Let me move this thing up here. So I was asked to talk about this huge elderberry project we have. Is this on track, Mitch? How you want me to go?
Absolutely, you're good to go.
Okay, so this is a specialty crop research initiative grant that we got in 2021. So I can talk a lot about elderberry, but the background, and Chris Patton is on, and let me just start by saying we started small with elderberry. We began growing it. We learned how to prune it. There's just a lot of things it basically was a wild crop, and we began learning how to domesticate it a little bit. There's still so much more work to do. But what happened is our friend Terry Durham, who many of you may know, he's the founder and head of River Hills Harvest, who Chris, you work with or work for. I'm not sure how that relationship is.
We work together.
Work
We've been
together.
working together for 12 years now.
So Terry, even early on, Terry took note of what we were doing and showed a lot of interest. And then, but as we made some progress, Terry just changed his life and made this his passion. And he used to be an organic vegetable grower, and he does construction, and he just decided to throw everything in and go elderberry. And this is probably 18 or 20 years ago. So it's really interesting to be a researcher doing research. It's fun, it's very interesting stuff. But if the farmers don't take note and don't show any interest, then it's, why bother? So, and Terry will tell the story about the first couple meetings we had, the one coming up in June. We had, 8 or 10 people show up. And, then it kept growing and kept growing. And I kind of was wondering if this was going to be another emu where, the eggs were $5,000 and you know what I mean with that story, but it just kept growing and growing and growing. And it was amazing. So when we had farmers jumping on, then it was, I wouldn't say easier to get grants, but it was easier to write grants. Hey, the farmers are picking this up and they need information. They need horticultural research being done. So we got a number of grants. And without going into great detail, so in 2010, so previous to 2010, I was involved. I've done a fair bit of research on medicinal plants like black cohosh and things, but elderberry absolutely is classified as a medicinal plant. So I was able to finagle elderberry, working it into a massive grant from NIH, National Institutes of Health, that went in and was funded in 2010. It was over $7 million. And elderberry was one of 5 species. There was garlic was in there, soybean, and then there was a couple of medicinal plant. There was one from South Africa, but elderberry became kind of the predominant one, and not me, but everyone else called it the Elderberry Center. So it allowed us to do a lot more plantings, but the main funding, it was an NIH grant, allowed us to do medicinal research on mice. So the focus was brain health. There was a lot of research on cancer, infectious disease, and brain health. Well, the brain health aspect is what really shined. And there's some very interesting papers published that showed with these mouse studies that mice fed a modest diet of elderberry versus mice that did not get elderberry had far less damage from a stroke. They recovered more quickly from a stroke. And I mean, it was just very interesting. So this was really interesting. And the farmers love this. Now they can cite these, elderberry, is truly, it's not just hearsay. There's, published research that shows elderberry benefits the brain. So anyway, that project was for 5 years, and it was amazing. It was really great working with these people. And eventually the project ended and it wasn't renewed. But by then there was a lot of momentum. And I mentioned earlier these small meetings that we had. Well, these meetings the elderberry meetings began to sell out. Well over 100 people from all over the world were coming to these little meetings in Missouri, from Chile, from the UK, from Canada, to hear about American elderberry. So I'm going on and on here, but about 4 years ago, people started saying, Andy, it's time to submit one of these big, massive specialty crop grant proposals. Okay, that sounds good. Good luck, Andy. I mean, a lot of people helped. I really appreciate it. But so it took 3 years of declined grant proposals, but every time we submitted one, we had good feedback and more people kind of jumped on the bandwagon. And a lot of you may know Diomi, who was there, Zamoro. He's no longer up there. He was really instrumental in some of the early proposals that we submitted. So anyway, so in 21, we finally got this, and I can shift slides now. Maybe. How do I shift? Oh no. There we go. So this was 5.3 million for 4 years. So we're right in the middle of it. So it started in September of 21. We're fully into the second growing season now. And things are going really well. There are a couple of, I mean, with this massive of a project, I wish everything were perfect. There's a few things that, we have a weed management trial, for example, that I'll talk about. And our master's student killed his herbicide plots. He oversprayed and they're all dead. So these things happen and students learn, we all learn. So further down on this slide, so this is a USDA NIFA, which is, I believe, National Institute of Food and Agriculture Specialty Crop Research Initiative grant. So it's pretty amazing. So, and I'll just kind of go, I don't think I'll take too much longer, but I'll just go through the project and you can ask questions if you want. So it has many, many components, and these grants it took a while. They really want a comprehensive program with all these different aspects, including outreach and economics and this kind of thing. So it's very diverse. So under horticulture, and I'm a horticulturist, under that we consider entomology kind of under horticulture. And our partner in this group is Lincoln University in Jefferson City, Missouri, the traditional, I believe it's called 1890s, the traditionally Black college. They're another land grant university here in Missouri. So really, really great partners. And they're looking at beneficial insects, pests, the pollinators, and then, integrated pest management, including spotted wing Drosophila that you all know. So the weeds are a very big challenge in elderberry, probably the #1 challenge. So we still haven't tackled the weeds. So I have a grad student that started, and we have some treatments that could be considered organic, such as we're trying some cover crops, different fabrics, and then we also have a herbicide treatment in there. And it's at 2 sites in Southwest Missouri and one in Central Missouri. It's a really good study. It's going to take 2 or 3 years to get the results. So the next one, this south to north germplasm evaluation, is a massive project. And this is where Chris comes in. So we sought out 12 selections of elderberry, which are basically wild, but had been selected as a potential improved elderberry for cultivation, because that's where we are. We don't have any breeding yet. So we have 12 of them. Chris sent one that we call Anoka, which is from near the Twin Cities, I think, not sure. And
yeah, Anoka County.
We have some from Iowa. We have 2 from Wisconsin, from Southwest Wisconsin. We have a few from Missouri, 1 from Kansas, 1 from Arkansas, 2 from Oklahoma, and 1 from Florida. So what we're trying to do is sample the native, the germplasm, the evolutionary development of these. They're all American elderberry from Florida to Minnesota. It's an amazing plant. And then, so we have 5 sites from Oklahoma, and some of you may know the Kerr Center for Sustainable Agriculture is in Poto, Oklahoma. They're kind of a counterpart to the Savannah Institute, but quite different. They're in east central Oklahoma. It's extremely hot there. Okay, then the site here in Southwest Missouri where I am, one in central Missouri that we call the Hark Farm Horticulture and Agroforestry Research Center. And then the Savannah Institute has a farm near Champaign, Illinois, and then another one near Spring Green, Wisconsin. And I'm not even sure what those are. They've had names, but you guys may know the one there in Spring Green. So what we've done is we've planted all 12 of these selections at all 5 of these sites. So we're planting the Minnesota varieties in Oklahoma, the Florida varieties in Minnesota and Wisconsin. And already I can give a whole lecture on this already. We don't even have much data. It's very interesting. We didn't really expect the Florida variety to like Wisconsin, but it's a phenomenal variety, and it really doesn't go fully dormant. But what happened is it winter killed the tops. Pretty much winter killed even at my site here in Southwest Missouri, but it's growing back beautifully from the roots. And if it continues to be as vigorous and prolific as it usually is, maybe that's very interesting that it could be grown like that. We're going to see. And then the varieties like Anoka and the ones from Wisconsin, I could tell here in Missouri. And here we have very bizarre late winter. We have warm and cold and warm and cold. Where you guys in Minnesota, hopefully it gets cold and stays cold, right? So these plants woke up. Your Anoka plants, they thought, oh, it's spring. And they're used to a short growing season, so they quickly leafed out. And luckily, elderberry is pretty tough, but there was a little bit of freeze damage on them. But where our Missouri varieties just kind of stayed put. I mean, it's incredible to me to see that genetic diversity. It's all American elderberry, but over, millions of years or whatever it is, they've developed these different habits. So again, not to go on too long about this, but I get calls all the time, will such and such variety grow in Canada? Will it grow in Georgia? And the answer is, I have no idea. So this is an effort, an attempt to see, for example, I would hypothesize that some of the Missouri varieties might grow pretty well in Oklahoma, might grow pretty well in Champaign, Illinois, but maybe not in the north, and vice versa. So I think they'll grow there, but they may not be productive. So we're going to find out. So that's kind of a long story, but is it kind of clear?
Yeah, that's fascinating.
So leaf tissue analysis. So we have, when anyone does leaf tissue analysis of elderberry, we have no data. There's no recommendation that, oh, this plant is low in boron or anything like that. So we'll be doing that. And the cultivar trials, I guess so there are additional cultivar trials underway. So breeding, I'm not a breeder, but we have a young woman doing her PhD on this project, and some of you may know Ron Revord. Anyone in the hazelnut group knows Ron. So he is our partner, and this woman, Liz Pranger, is really doing a great job and looking at the pollination biology, doing hand pollinations as well as open pollinations. We have the second year we have 2,000 or 3,000 plants now in the field from the first year of open pollinated breeding, which is kind of a long story to explain. And the genome sequencing. So probably 10 years ago to sequence somebody's DNA probably cost $1 million. Now it's about $5,000. So it's being done. It may already be done. And Liz likes to talk about how many more genes elderberry has than humans, and I have no idea. So mechanical harvest is extremely important in elderberry in scaling up. Most are still hand harvested. We have a lot of kind of mechanical assist harvest. And then also some of the growers here tell me that the biggest bottleneck is actually after harvest, getting everything quickly processed, destemmed, because here in Missouri, we harvest in August and it's 100 degrees. Those berries will not last in the back of a pickup truck. They have to be dealt with very, very quickly. So we have a group of ag engineers here at University of Missouri who are working on this, and they've made some good progress. They're really trying a lot of different things. The biggest bottleneck, which this is very similar with black walnut and other crops, I know we can mechanically harvest them, but the breeding needs to be done to improve them for even ripening berries. Because if you go in and mechanically harvest something and you're knocking a lot of green berries off, it can either ruin the product or it'll cost a fortune to thin that out. So, the breeding is slow. So hopefully these two will catch up someday. And I am hopefully pretty soon that we can mechanically harvest and really, really get this thing going. I mentioned, so Andrew's on the line. I am not an economist. I'm assuming Andrew is an economist, working with Connie, I wrote it down, Connie Carlson and Colin Puritan, if I'm pronouncing that right, are really important partners on economics. And there's this group called, I believe it's FBLA or FBMA, that Colin is working with. I can't even begin to explain all of that. Production support tools, like, is this farmer losing money or making money? Looking at marketing. So we've done a number of surveys on. One of our partners in University of Missouri did this Qualtrics thing where she surveyed 1,000 consumers, and have they ever heard of elderberry, and this kind of thing. So I'm not an economist, but I understand how important it is. So it's a really, really important part of this grant. And the other person, Dr. Teo Scavas here at University of Missouri, is our economist here, and he is more interested in the production economics. How much does it cost to grow elderberries, this kind of thing. So it's very interesting. Food science, I mentioned the brain health project a while ago. So the food science aspect is very interesting. Chris and Terry, they're making incredible elderberry products. They have all kinds of new products made with flowers. It's mind-boggling. Now they're making a skin salves out of the flowers and the leaves. They keep innovating. And some other groups down here in Southwest Missouri. But nevertheless, there's, this grant can help develop even more products. So, and of course, this is way beyond wine and jelly. Now, this is really into dietary supplements. So the biggest push right now in the food science is the spray drying of the juice. And then once you press the juice out, you have this beautiful pumice left over, which is incredibly rich in antioxidants and polyphenols. So they're, I got a student here, so they're, hang on here. Logan, I'll catch you in a few. So they are re-extracting that with, I believe, ethanol. And so this is actually being submitted for publication pretty quick. So you have the juice, you can spray dry it. Once it's spray dried, it is extremely shelf stable. You can ship it. If you're trying to ship frozen berries or frozen juice or bottled juice with heavy bottles, it's very expensive. And, the spray dried product can go into granola bars and smoothies. And it's just incredibly versatile. It's a beautiful product. So it's very interesting seeing this. So this is, and then these spray dried juice segue into the brain health project. And because this is a USDA grant. We had to kind of downplay the brain health part because they would say, well, why aren't you going for NIH? Because this is a medical question. But how we could say this in the grant proposal was that the farmers are demanding this. And I mean, over and over again, the farmers, they want more brain health research. They want to put it in their website. They want it on their labels. So that was a great way to spin that for the grant, which we got, luckily. So this is starting, this mouse study is starting like any day now. It's taken this long. We had to develop the spray dried juice product first. And basically it's going, the University of Missouri, there's a Center for Neurochemistry. I believe I have it on the last slide. It's mind-boggling the research they do with mice and brain research. It's just great. So this project is going to use aged mice, and I don't know that if a mouse is 6 or 8 months old, I think it's equivalent to 60 or 70 years old. I'm not sure how that is. So these are older mice, and they will be fed diets with and without elderberry, but then they're also adding DHA, which is a very long word. It's an omega-3 fatty acid. So the hypothesis is that the DHA is really good for the brain, elderberry is really good for the brain, and combined, they're going to be even greater for the brain. So some mice will have, control mice, elderberry only, DHA only, and DHA and elderberry combined. And they have these incredible ways of looking at as the mouse ages and mouse begins to get dementia, they may have a version of Alzheimer's, memory loss. So if they're trained on certain things, where to find the food, and then they lose their memory, it's incredible. So I'm really excited about this, and we have a really good team. So actually this study should not take very long. Since mice don't live that long, hopefully by winter, this will be done. And hopefully we get good results. So that's the basis of the grant. So I use this slide for University of Missouri. So extension, I'm in plant sciences, chemistry, proteomics. We have, I didn't mention the Center for Metabolomics. So there's a whole nother section on metabolomics and natural product chemistry on elderberry, taking this thing apart and looking at they find like 30,000 compounds in elderberry juice and in the elderberry flower. And the technology is amazing. They can see what these are, which ones are medicinal and beneficial. And now we're sending them, different fruit from different cultivars and different soils and, unripe fruit and this kind of thing. And they're really, really digging into this. It's very interesting. Center for Agroforestry, again, the med school here at MU, 2 of the ag experiment stations. So this Department of Biomedical, Biological, and Chemical Engineering is kind of our ag engineer group. Food sciences, and there's the brain health group, the Center for Translational Neurosciences, and then applied social sciences for the economics folks. And just to mention our partners, so the Kerr Center for Sustainable Ag they're hosting one of our plantings, and we'll be having field days down there. Lincoln University partner, again, on entomology. University of Minnesota folks I mentioned, Savannah Institute, really great. North Carolina State, and you need the keys here. I'm about done. And then, hang on, thank you. And then Penn State is involved as part of the Ag Engineering Mechanical Harvest Group. So there's just one guy there at Penn State who's a very good colleague of our group here at Missouri. So I think that's my last slide. So
great. Well, thank you, Andy. Any questions for Andy? And go ahead, if you're online, just unmute yourself and chime in.
I can go on and on about elderberry, trust me.
I guess I have one question that could be a broader conversation. I don't want to eat into Chris's time, but Andy, are you able to stay on to the end? I can save it, or
At least for another 20 minutes or so, yeah.
okay. Why don't I save it? Let's get Chris in there, and unless there's anybody else who wants to unmute themselves, I just don't want to shortchange Chris.
Okay. Well, Andy really gave you a very good summary of the history. And it was nice to walk down memory lane with that. I've been working with Terry Durham since 2011. Helped him market a number of his products and still do. And so I'm quite familiar from the very practical side of the product development. In 2012, I founded the Midwest Elderberry Cooperative in Minnesota. After meeting Paul Otten, and who is a longtime berry grower, especially in the area of black currants, et cetera, and up in the Natura farm near Scandia, Minnesota. I farmed with him for 6 years, elderberry, and I learned a lot about the other berries. I mean, he had raspberries, he had U-pick, he had a lot of stuff going on there. And I really took advantage of his 40 plus years of experience growing organically. And with him, really, I felt comfortable in starting a grower cooperative. And we had meetings up here. Terry came up. Terry is a member of the Midwest Elderberry Cooperative board. Our membership is concentrated in Minnesota and Wisconsin, but we literally do have members from New Jersey and Virginia to California. And I work with probably over 150 farmers. We're an open co-op, so and we haven't pushed people to get into elderberry. I've always told them to try it out for a lot of the reasons that Andrew Thomas covered, and to see how it works and see how it works into their farm plan, because there is a lot of manual labor that's required. And I have regularly, not frequently, but regularly get inquiries from other organic farmers that are farming organically with machinery about farming elderberry. And the first thing I tell them is about the labor requirements, and suggest that if that doesn't put them off, then that they start small. And I would say commercially, we do have success with small scale growers. It is the largest commercial berry crop in Missouri. It has been for some years. And I work with a lot of small growers, and many of them make their own products. And part of what we do as a co-op is supply them the berries and flowers that they need when they can't produce enough. When I founded the co-op, that's really when I started together with Paul, because Paul was well established in the Minnesota agricultural scene, and with SFA and all kinds of other organizations, and new people at the university. And I met, oh, come on. Your head. I'm just blank on the name, at a conference. But I had been talking, and we talked and met with Domi Zamora and other folks at the university for some years, I was really happy to hear his role in helping Andy get those grants. I didn't know about that, but we've had a very long conversation. But in 2021, I actually had some money from a USDA grant and hired the university to do an updated feasibility study. And this is where Colin and Connie became involved. We did a survey of all the growers. They did a really good job surveying the growers from the standpoint of their economics and how they used elderberry and how they felt about the co-op and the role of the co-op and things. And then that led us to our current grant from the Minnesota Department of Ag Specialty Crops Grant, where we started working with AURI in setting up protocols for annual harvest management. I worked for Pillsbury from 95 to 2000, primarily providing IT support, first in engineering and then in international R&D. And so I've had those years of experience in looking at how commercialization worked. And so one of the things we needed to do in order to compete with European industry and scale up to larger markets is to be able to document the nutrients that are important to potential buyers. And Andy cited on that too, is particularly in regards to the papers and research done with the mouse studies in the brain. And I do have a lot of that information posted online at the Midwest Elderberry Cooperative website. You go to the health, then you have to click again. There's too much information for my website. I need to update that, but I haven't gotten the funds to do that yet. And I'm not going to do it myself. I stopped doing web design about 10, 12 years ago. I just try to keep the information there and keep it accurate and as up to date as possible. Presentation needs some work and I need to edit. There's probably too much information now, and some of the older stuff I need to cut out. But so my focus has been primarily at this point shifted more into increasing the scale, because we've got AURI and we've been working with them, and we're going to set it up so that we have 3 different cultivars that are common: Ranch, Bob Gordon, and Adams, where we're testing 8 important nutrients, and we'll track those differences and establish best times to harvest, et cetera. And the goal is to develop a regional hub about 40 minutes west of the Twin Cities, where I've got up to 200 acres available for commercial production of elderberry. And to that end, we are looking primarily at this point on trying to solve the problems for destemming the elderberries. In other words, once they've been picked, and we're not going after mechanical picking at this point, because for the reasons that Andy mentioned, we want to speed up the process because right now the berries are small. I can get about 6 or so of them on my thumbnail, just as an idea. And the cyme, they don't all detach evenly from the cyme. And so there are some areas there for horticultural breeding that can make the whole thing easier. But we have to work with what we are, and the work that the University of Missouri has done and the other farmers in working over the years, we have cultivars that are commercially viable, and we can manage the harvest so that we keep down the minimum number of unripe berries, even if it means losing some off the plant. But Terry Durham, in his destemmer, we can maximize maybe 300 to 500 pounds at most an hour of destemming. And that requires a crew of 4 to 6 people. And that's not good enough to compete with the European imports, because Europe has established infrastructure. It's been a commercial crop there since basically before the Middle Ages. And it is a different form there. It's tree form. We have cane form here. And so they can graze sheep under there. We can't do that here. And the other disadvantage we have with European imports is that wild collected is considered certified organic in Europe. And so it comes here. And that means we have certified organic imports from wild collected berries where there's been no investment in the ground. And that's another disadvantage on the price side of things. So we have to become more efficient. And that is our current goal. Fortunately, and so let me get through this a little bit. And this is, I'll get ahead of myself otherwise, but these are some of the basic process, I'd say ingredient products and other ways that elderberries can be used. and have been used and are being used. We really still have no true commercial scale farm like you'd think of it with normal crops. If someone has 10 acres or 20 acres of elderberry, that's a pretty large orchard. And we estimated back in 2017 that there were over 30,000 acres in Europe, less than 1,000 in the USA, but I think that's probably doubled easily by now, maybe even up to as much as 3,000. It's hard to know because most of the plots are on the smaller side at 2 to 5 acres. Missouri had 350 acres in 2017, and there's a lot of interest in it. Basically, we have figured out from just the economic side that we need to target $2 to $2.50 a pound, $2 for sustainably grown, $2.50 a pound for certified organic berries in order to make ingredients that and products that can compete with European imports. In selling Terry's products, I went to a number of national trade shows like Expo West and especially food associations, summer shows, winter shows. They gave me an award in 2018 as a business lead of the year for starting the co-op and working with elderberry. And a lot of your food producers, the larger scale folks, they would really like to do it. You know, I had good discussions, but we weren't able to provide what they needed in the volumes with the dependability that they would need in order to establish, you know, a new product development, make that investment. And so my discussions with a lot of these folks did end up with some new elderberry flavors and elderberry products, but they were using the imported elderberry. And so my goal is to change that. And I'd like to, my goal for Minnesota is 200 acres of elderberry. And we currently have about 800 total fruit acres. So that would be a significant contribution to elderberry and fruit production in Minnesota. And elderberry as a perennial does do a lot in support of native pollinators and erosion, carbon sequestration, and everything else that's good as far as what perennials do for the environment. I've summarized some of this already. What we're working on now, the Minnesota legislature passed last year value chain development allocations, $500,000, which is being administered by the Minnesota Department of Agriculture. And I've put in 2 grant applications, one for $48,800 and the other for $50,000 towards 2 different commercial processing approaches. One is Minnesota based, and it's out in Fountain Art Farms, where, by the way, Andy, they're also doing sap analysis, and they've started doing sap analysis on elderberry and relating that to their nutrients and fertilization and everything. But they also have some engineering background, and they've got 4 different specific improvements on elderberry destemming based on what we have currently available. And the second one is from Washington State, and I'm working with a retired treetop process manager. He'd spent 30 years with treetop. His name's Tim Wilson. He has his own company now, and he has a functioning continuous flow destemmer to IQF processor that he uses for the West Coast elderberries, which is very different from our Midwest elderberries. The blue elderberry, the cerulean, it's blue, a little larger, grows on big trees. They have other specific challenges there, mainly that it's hard for them to propagate trees with consistent berry quality. But it works pretty well for him, 1,000 to 2,000 pounds an hour. And so the second grant I have is to get part of that going. That whole system would be like 500,000. We're limited to 50,000 on the grant. So we're only able to get some of the early stage, and we're focusing at first on the specific destemming aspect, and then it would hook up to conveyors and um, um, sanitation chambers and then into the IQF freezer and into totes for frozen storage. And the key is here, why IQF? Well,
Can you define that? Can you define that, Chris, please?
sorry,
Can you define IQF, please?
individually quick frozen.
Okay.
So right now we pack in 4-gallon, 25-pound blocks. And it's like anything else. You want somebody to do something, you need to make it easy for them. And this does not work on any kind of scale of production, both in thawing or in pouring or in working into existing process lines. So we actually we tried back in 2017, 2018, maybe even earlier, maybe starting 2016. I did have some projects approved with AURI and working first with a Minnesota beverage company on doing a puree, which is another ingredient that has format that has a lot of people interested. With elderberry, the idea would be to do a pure elderberry puree, and then you'd blend it with pear or apple in order to reach the volumes for commercial production. That didn't work because the company had financial issues, even though we had the money lined up to do the project, and so that didn't happen. And then we had things set to go for an IQF trial with Iowa Choice Harvest down in Iowa and Marshalltown, and a tornado hit the plant and destroyed it before we could do the trial. So, and that was pretty much the end of that effort for IQF for them. But I'm coming back to that because if you have little berries that can be poured like little BBs, then you can use them in pie, in baking, in all kinds of things that will feed into commercial production lines, such as I used to sit in on as the Pillsbury engineers discussed making the Grands biscuits or other things that they did. So that's where we are as far as commercial production. And this gives you a picture of the current destemming. This is an early version, then there are new versions, but it's basically a shaking screen. And you have to sort of work the berry cymes over that and let the screen separate the berries from the little wire branchy cymes. And then because of the heat and the issues of berries spoiling, this kind of production out in the field needs to be near a freezer capacity. And this was a storage design by Paul Hanneman, who, by the way, was a mentor at University of Minnesota engineering students. And when he was there, we had a couple of University of Minnesota engineering student projects on elderberry, both on a process line for cleaning, and then secondly on a rotational barrel screen for drying, thermally drying the elderberries, as opposed to a flat drying surface, which is what we currently use. We are using the Flacker's Crackers original cracker dryer that I bought on us for a song. It's not ideal, but we have 700 square feet of drying capacity, and we do sell hundreds of pounds of dried berries online using that technology. This is a view of West Branch Elderberry's processing line. They do have a process line. They're using a modified grape destemmer, which is another alternative for separating the berries from the cyme. You have to pick, as you see a couple of people there, they're picking out pieces that before they go into the scale in the bucket. In this case, they're using lined boxes at the end of the processing line on the right. This is the dryer I mentioned. What we have here is it's a trailer, and it's been converted into a commercial kitchen in Iowa. And, of course, passed all the inspection and everything. It's all stainless. The reason we put it in a trailer is you can better control the temperature and humidity, which reduces the amount of energy required for the drying. So these are just some of the options for farmers use for selling directly. This is the flowers. This is a wild flower. I call it Floribunda. I have it growing here, but I found that along Minnehaha Creek. It's not good for commercial growing because the primal cane doesn't bear berries, but it has these big, wonderful flowers. This is Adams 2, which is one of our most dependable. And these are getting 6 to 10 feet tall in a year. And so it requires a lot of fertilization in the field. And because they're cut every year. This is a field of ranch down in Iowa again. And this is a picture of Terry with Bob Gordon, which at the time had the sweetest, largest berries. Our big enemy, the SWD, some soft flies, other pest issues. And then this is a summary, some of the points I made earlier on commercial scale production. So I don't know what happened there. Maybe I reached the end.
Yeah.
Yeah, that must be the end. So.
Great. Well,
So basically, that's kind of where we are right now. Now, I also have, in March, I spoke to the American Aronia Berry Association's annual conference in Des Moines. I'm working with Renewing the Countryside and Food Investment Fund out of Madison, Wisconsin, on a different grant where we're looking at finding the gaps in the value chain for elderberry, aronia, and black currants. And so that has helped me to fund some of my market work. And I do have 3 projects right now exploring the joint production of aronia elderberry ingredients. One is a juice, liquid juice, shelf stable. The other 2 are spray dry liquids. And basically looking ambient temperature, 106 degree. And we've done lab tests on them and they've passed the lab, and I need to raise funds now to do a pilot run of a small and commercial scale in order to get the costing down and to do a market study to see if we can produce it at a price that is desirable by higher volume buyers.
what's the motivator? So, and this is one project with both berries in it, or?
Yes, and basically, I've been doing this on a Social Security check, so I'm leveraging existing relationships in the aronia, has they have a price advantage in that they can do mechanized harvest. So they're paying their growers 95 cents to $1.15 a pound, but nobody wants to buy aronia, hardly. So they have marketing challenges, and the idea is if they can add elderberry to that, it'll be more marketable, and elderberry also adds a considerable amount of sweetness.
Yeah, makes sense. I wondered if it was a sweetness factor there.
Oh, absolutely. Elderberry is about half as sweet as a grape. So, we're looking at 10 to 12, and when you make a juice, it'll be like 14 bricks.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, any questions for either Chris or Andy?
This is Linda Meschke. I just have a question and would be interested in your thoughts on it. It seems to me like elderberries are, the berry itself is, the timeliness of harvest is much more critical than it is with aronia berries.
Yes.
Is that true?
That's absolutely true. And I have not touched on flowers. We have tremendous potential for flowers. I mean, if I could produce them. I have a national buyer who would buy 10,000 pounds of dried flowers a year. And we sell hundreds of pounds right now, and mainly to brewers. They do ciders, and then I also sell to herbalists, and they do herbal infusions and teas and things like that.
How are the flowers harvested? Just by hand?
Yes. Yeah. And
the main
typically for
problem-
a berry farmer, we have encouraged them to harvest flowers that are from the ground up to about 3 to 4 feet above ground. And for two reasons: field maintenance, it sort of reduces the low ground target for spotted wing Drosophila, because the berries will weigh those branches down and get close to the ground, and that sort of provides an environment that's more conducive to spreading the SWD. And then the other thing is that they can sell those flowers and dry them. I'll pay them $30 a pound for dried flowers and resell them. And also, if you're taking those flowers off, Andy and the University of Missouri, they've done some studies, but common sense would be then there's more energy that goes into the remaining flowers and berries, which are at an easier level also for picking, and they get more sun, and so they ripen more evenly, and they're further away and less attracted to SWD, because SWD doesn't like the heat.
I was just going to chime in that a problem with elderberries is as soon as they're ripe, they fall off the cyme that we call it, the panicle, where aronia will kind of hang on, until you're ready. So that's a huge difference.
It is, and there are some. I have a variety I call soft that appeared in my garden. I don't know what it is. It's got a green cyme, kind of like ranch, but the cyme is extremely soft. It doesn't break up when the berries come off. The berries come off nicely. The berries are on the small side, but they ripen very evenly and they hang on longer. So this gets back to some of Andy's earlier comments that we're in an area where there's so much to learn, and because there's such great variety within this singular species or subspecies, Sambucus nigrocanadensis.
On the individual quick frozen, have you looked at the blueberry processing? Because that's what they do, is they individual quick freeze it and then they put in 30-pound boxes.
Yes.
And,
Yes, and then in fact, if we're successful in getting the facility there and in Delano area, the whole process IQF line will be mobile, and part of our goal was to make it available to other small fruit producers in Minnesota.
Great.
I have a quick
so
question.
you'll be building the processing at west of the cities?
Yes, yeah, we're looking in the Delano area, Wright County, or a little. I've got 4 or 5 growers there that have potential for large scale commitment, and so they'd be relatively close, so that when we harvested, we could take it to that facility. But I also wanted to create a unit that was mobile, and we're either talking, freshwater, ozone, things that are not going to pollute the environment. But the energy component of that is quite expensive to have mobile energy. But it would also be set up so that you could deploy it without the destemming part, and it could be used for blueberries or black currants or crops that are harvested earlier than elderberry.
Yeah, Matthew.
Oh, yeah. I am wondering about propagation. You said it's canes. So what's the is propagation a bottleneck, I guess?
No. We use hardwood cuttings primarily. You can do softwood cuttings, but they, done properly, if you do the proper soil preparation and you have some kind of weed management, because like Andy was talking about, weed management can be a very big problem in getting an orchard established. I think once the elderberry is established, it is quite competitive in most cases. Bindweed was an issue when I was farming, but the other thing is that the plant spreads through rhizomes very vigorously, and that depends also on the cultivar. Some of them tend to bunch closer to where they are, and others will send runners out 6, 8, 10 feet. And so you have to mow them, or they take over the whole field.
I can talk, I won't talk now, but I could talk quite a bit about propagation. We have several studies underway that a lot of farmers hear that you can just take a cutting and stick it in the ground and it'll grow. And in most cases, that's true, but it's a very big risk if you're paying $2 to $5 for that cutting to stick it in the ground and cross your fingers. So on the other hand, rooting them in the greenhouse and then putting a rooted plant out has a much greater expense. So we have a really good study going on, and it basically says in Missouri anyway, the earlier the better. Sticking these cuttings in January, February, and the larger, more robust cutting have a 80 or 90% chance of success. If you wait till now when it's warm, you're not. So
Absolutely concur. In
Real
fact,
quick.
I've told growers when they're expanding, can do their own cuttings and are expanding the field, to do it actually in the wintertime, Andy, and it works very well.
Real quick, we have another study on elderberry viruses. And currently, so like in strawberry and blackberry, we have in grapes, we have virus indexed nursery stock. So yes, you can take your own cuttings, but in most cases, we encourage growers to go to the nursery that has these plants that are certified to be virus free. So that's, again, we're very primitive in elderberries. So we take cuttings, we mail them all over the world. We are probably distributing viruses. So we have a two-tiered project right now to not only rid elderberry of viruses and then perhaps bring the whole industry up a notch into virus indexed elderberries, which many farmers may not like that because that's a big income source for them. So we'll have to see how that goes. But it's really important to uplift the whole industry. If viruses are being spread around and you know, we don't know what we're doing on that, we need to address it. So we got a nice little, a different grant for that. And we have a fascinating relationship with University of Arkansas, who has a clean plant laboratory who's doing this work for us. So it's I'm excited about that.
Yeah, I'm interested in learning more about that. And I will say, Paul Otten had a nursery, North Star Nursery, that he ran for years, and primarily was focused on black currants. But we grew what he called maxi plugs, and people who use those maxi plugs, I'd say they saved a year on orchard establishment. And it also gave greater flexibility. So if someone didn't have their soil prepared adequately, you know, they could get that done, maybe do a green manure crop in the summer and then plant them in the fall. And that was done successfully a few times that I'm aware of.
So
Yeah,
you talked about, go ahead.
Sorry, Chris, you talked about trying to start a juice industry with elderberries, black currants, and aronia. I'm wondering, like, rather than investing in like processing infrastructure, have you had any communications with the cranberry industry in Wisconsin to share whatever equipment they're using?
That's the whole point of my alliance is that we're using existing infrastructure, so co-packers. And I did a juice trial a couple years back with Rise Nutrition in Wisconsin Rapids. They do a lot of cranberry, and it was successful. University of Minnesota was involved with that. Colin was out for that, pressing himself. that was also part of that first grant from the USDA. So yes, that is definitely the approach we are taking. I focused primarily on the IQF because small scale IQF does not seem to be readily available. And so that seemed to be, if we're going to buy anything, that would be what we'd want to invest in. And otherwise, I've always, I'm working like with Regenerative Agricultural Alliance as well. They've got a new facility in Albert Lea, and we've been talking to them about doing the puree because their existing equipment might work for that.
Okay, thanks.
I was curious about timeline for orchard establishment, how many years till you get harvest, and as a, follow-on question, is this an attractive, good crop for a new emerging beginning farmer? Because it's, high value per acre, or is this a tricky crop? And you wouldn't promote it to somebody who doesn't have a bunch of experience to build on.
So
Me?
if you do it right, at least in Missouri, if you get everything planted right now, May 1st, you will have a crop next year. So you're really in business pretty quickly. You may not have a bumper crop, but you'll have a crop. And by the following year, you should be in full production. And my opinion would be, when I get a lot of calls, I tell people to start small. When I hear they want to plant 10, 20 acres, no. Even if you're experienced, start with a half an acre and see how it goes. Some people may change their mind, others may love it. I mean, it's a high labor crop. It's not a difficult crop to grow at all. It just requires care and labor and attention and the whole thing about make sure you have your fruit sold before you put it in the ground type thing, because everyone's elderberries will come ripe at the same time. So I think, see Chris nodding, I encourage people to start small and, just develop their network and then, add another acre if it's working for you.
Even smaller than a quarter acre, depends on, what their scale of production is. And access to market and a marketing plan is critical, as Andrew was mentioning, or you need access to frozen storage. I have had some farmers that, will store, with a local butcher who has some room for that for some period of time. Getting affordable storage for fruits and vegetables now is more difficult than it was 10 years ago. And others, they have to rent trailers and run trailers, with the freezing units on them until it's sold. So that is critical. The marketing is critical. And for instance, from the standpoint of the co-op, my goal right now, I was on the phone with Terry a couple of weeks ago. We now have enough elderberries where in production, and that annually we've got volumes where I could go out and start making larger commitments and do annual contracts for harvest, which we've not really been able to ethically go and do right now. But now we can. I mean, before, but now we can. And that's a critical point for transitioning to investment in infrastructure. We need corporate, food and beverage company, doesn't have to be corporate, but alliances who are willing to start signing up contracts for sale in advance of harvest so that we can make these investments and bring in the crop at an affordable price for them.
If someone didn't want to go the destemmer route, could they just focus on juice? And you wouldn't need a destemmer, you would just focus on juice, right?
You still have,
That works for wine.
you've got to destem because you can't crush the stems and it'll ruin the product. It'll have green
Oop.
tar in it. So there's different ways of destemming, but if it's small scale, you can freeze them and then just bang them on a tray and get them off. But if you're getting into any acreage, and this is the beauty of Chris's group having instead of every farmer buying a $5,000 destemmer, you're going to use once a year, just, share and that can work well.
But it could work for wine. Just out of curiosity.
Yes, yes. Wineries vary in how they want the berries, but some of them will take them on the stem, frozen on the stem. But basically, we tell the farmer, unless you've got someone who has upfront said they're going to buy so much in that form, you should destem them, because for everything else, they need to be destemmed. And your primary buyers are going to be, a volume, will be people that are like breweries or wineries, kombucha brewers, things like that.
But most wineries have a destemmer. It may not be an elderberry destemmer. They can run them through their destemmer and it'll get rid of the worst of the stems.
Right, right.
And you don't want to know what's in your wine, bugs, insects, just enjoy.
Oh, we don't need Upton Sinclair here.
Cool. Anyone else with questions out there?
You guys in Minnesota, most of you know my good friend Sherry Hurd.
Hmm?
Please say hello to her. She and I were in grad school together. She's a very good friend. So I was wondering if she might even be on this meeting.
You know what? She's not a regular on the Forever Green meetings, but she, you must know that for years and years, she worked with Nick Jordan, who is the co-founder of Forever Green. So yeah, I'll tell her hi for you next time I see her.
Sure, thanks.
All right, well, thank you very much, Andy and Chris. Really appreciate it. I learned a ton about the state of the research and the market, and I'm just excited that we've got this collaboration going.
Right.
And if anyone has any questions, you can just email me, info@midwest-elderberry.coop. I'm happy to answer them.
Cool.
Thanks, everybody.
Cool.
That was
All right.
fun.
Thanks. Take care. Bye-bye.